So I recently watched a press conference. We could call it a press conference. Sure. The press was there, and then there were two presidential bodies from two different countries. It was President Trump of the USA and President Zelensky of Ukraine, and their respective cabinet bodies. They were discussing. I don't know if I should say they were discussing what document they were going to sign, or they were just talking before they sign a document, but there was some kind of document, contract, or peace treaty of some sort they were going to sign. This was obviously in regards to the war between Ukraine and Russia. So the whole point of this is to get to a point of peace. That's what the document may be about. But before signing that, they had a press conference quickly. It was intense. It was intense to say the least, and I have my opinion about it, of course. I wrote it down so that I do not forget it. So I'm gonna read it to you so that nothing is missed, so that everything is spoken, that I picked up. And then if anything else just pops up, I'll just mention it as it comes. But yeah. Have a listen. So I watched the Trump and Zelensky press conference that took place before they were going to sign some sort of deal that would impact the status of the war between Ukraine and Russia. It started off well, more like everyone trying to read the direction of the room. As the conversation and questions progressed, the direction was clear, right? So when it started, it was a bit more. Yeah, it's like when a party is about to begin, we know we're here for a party, but before we get to the fun, we like want to know what level of fun are we getting at. So something like that. That yes, we're here for a serious conversation, but what level of seriousness is this? And what sides are being represented, like what side of the story are we giving to the public? That's what I thought was happening there as the thing was beginning. But as I said, the conversation and questions progressed, the direction was clear, and here it is. So America is presenting itself as a big helper to Ukraine. Okay, there was a lot of ego pumping talk from President Trump, a lot of talk about when former President Biden was in office, Russia attacked Ukraine, and a generous amount of talk that presents Ukraine as a wimp and very helpless. And Trump was, it was especially when questions would be asked, and how he would just answer the questions would portray, he would refer a lot to when Biden was in office, that the war would not have happened if he was in office at the time, because he's more of a peacemaker and he's respected like that. But when it comes to Biden, he was not that respected. Hence, Putin and Zelensky could then begin this war thing that is currently happening between Ukraine and Russia. That was more of his go-to answers as the press asked questions. But Zelensky spoke more on what is happening in Ukraine, that despite Trump's contact with Putin, Putin does hate Ukraine and does not recognize them as a people that should exist. At some point, Zelensky was questioning, because they asked Wuti when was the last time Trump spoke to Putin. And Trump was like, maybe like a week ago, 2 days ago. I'm not sure. I may be wrong. Stand to be corrected. As Zelensky keeps responding to his questions, he tries to portray Ukraine as, not as the victim per se, but his truth to the matter. And his truth to the matter is, despite the fact that Trump and Putin are on good terms, Putin totally, utterly dislikes Ukraine, does not consider Ukraine as people who should legitimately exist, similar to what Hitler was doing to the Jews, that he did not recognize them as a people that should exist. Similarly to that's the words that Zelensky used. He said Putin has spoken out publicly that he does not recognize Ukraine as people that should exist, right? And Putin has broken countless times. He has broken ceasefire deals so many times. Zelensky is questioning that, fine, we're going to sign this deal, but because of how Putin perceives Ukraine, what guarantees that now that we're going to sign this deal with Trump in power, what guarantees that Putin will not break ceasefire again? So I'm assuming then the document they're going to sign is a ceasefire document, so that Putin and Zelensky can stop the war. But what guarantees it? If he has countless times broken the ceasefire documents, or whatever the case may be, ceasefire contract, what guarantees Uguti now he will actually abide by that? And I guess the whole answer to that from Trump's perspective is because I'm in power now, I'm respected. Trump is, he was pumping his ego. He was pumping his ego very, very much. For the most part, it seemed Zelensky was trying to do damage control and not come across as a helpless country, because that's how Trump was portraying Ukraine to be. That, you know, we've given money to Ukraine, we've given, I think that when Biden was in office, Biden gave money, but it wasn't enough, or just gave them money and not troops, or something that was inadequate. And when Trump got into office, you know, things began to change a little bit, and Trump representing America is just a savior to Ukraine, just basically portraying Ukraine as a helpless wimp. And in any opportunity that Zelensky got to respond, not directly to Trump's comments, but to questions that were posed, he would try to just readjust our focus or readjust our perspective of Ukraine, and to see that as much as the war exists, Ukraine is still functioning as a country, that they do still attend schools, even if it means they have to go underground or do online schools. There are still churches that function, there are still grocery stores, you know, life still continues. There are parts that have been affected by the war, that have been devastated beyond repair or rather beyond recognition, but there are parts as well in Ukraine that do still function. And that's what Zelensky was trying to portray, just to damage control from what Trump was saying. Now, if you think that Trump was not doing enough damage, join in the conversation. President Vance, JD Vance, Deputy President JD Vance, I think it's JD, but Vance did not make things easier. If anything, he added fuel to the fire. After presenting America as a diplomatic country in the instance of the war between Ukraine and Russia, Zelensky questioned the diplomacy. There was a part where Vance responded. What was the comment about? I think it's in reference to the multiple times that Ukraine and Russia had been fighting, and now the objective of America is to bring peace. Hence Trump's initiative to bring peace between the two. And then Trump also did mention that there have been countless wars that have been stopped by him that we don't know about. It's just behind the curtain stuff. Wars that did not happen. Sometimes it's wars that did happen, and he was part and parcel of ensuring that the wars end. So JD Vance was just adding to that America's objective is to be a very diplomatic medium or something, a very diplomatic object in the midst of this war. And this is also referencing to the times when Putin kept on breaking ceasefire. So because Putin had kept on breaking ceasefire, Zelensky then questions, where was your diplomacy then? Because there were countless times where there were ceasefire treaties or ceasefire contracts that were signed, but then Putin would break them. So back to the question of what's different now. What does your diplomacy mean now? You know? Yeah? That was Zelensky's response, that referencing to the countless times Putin had attacked Ukraine, but America's diplomacy was nowhere to be found. What diplomacy is Vance talking about? After that response, seeing it as a direct attack, Vance called out Zelensky as an ungrateful person who has no shame in discussing hard truths in front of the media rather, when a deal is about to be signed. He called Zelensky disrespectful. Trump added by talking down on Zelensky in a 2 minutes that felt like a father reprimanding an ungrateful child. Now, they just unleashed on Zelensky. It's like Zelensky decided to touch on a topic that they had spoken about privately, and we're like, okay, we will not address this. But they had backed Zelensky into a helpless corner, that now it's like, okay, I think now we are totally wimps in the eyes of the world, and I have to defend my country. And that's what Zelensky was doing. And because he did that, Vance flipped. He's like, you are ungrateful. Of the times that you were here right now, when have you ever been grateful for what America's doing for you? When have you ever been grateful for what Trump's office is doing in respect to, or rather regarding the war happening between Ukraine and Russia? You're very ungrateful, you're very disrespectful. And then Trump, when Zelensky was about to defend himself to what Vance said, Trump not barges in physically, but then just jumps into the conversation and talks down on Zelensky. I think Zelensky said something like, but just because you're speaking loud about, and then he didn't finish his sentence, and then Trump jumped into the sentence. It's like, no, he wasn't shouting, he wasn't speaking loud, and that's when he just talked down on Zelensky. Like, it was very harsh. I'm not exaggerating in any way. It's not exactly how it happened, of course, but it was very harsh. So Trump goes on for like 2 minutes to reprimand, maybe 2 minutes is too much, but he reprimands Zelensky. God, he's reprimanding a child. And then, like, this was all humiliating to watch because, okay, I think I was tired when I was writing this. I'm reading the sentence, it doesn't make sense. This was very humiliating to watch because Zelensky is not a child. Trump is not their father, and Zelensky needs to defend the remaining dignity of this country. So from my perspective, I saw that as an okay thing to do from Zelensky's side. Yes, we are here to sign a treaty deal. Yes, America, you are helping us to mediate between Ukraine and Russia. But don't let us now bow down before you and, walk on our, squabble on our knees just because you are helping us. It does not mean you can talk down, and it does not mean you can make us look bad. No matter how great America is. I thought twice before I said that. I think I should not have said. But anyways, yeah, I think from my perspective, Zelensky was not being ungrateful. He was doing what any rational and normal person would do if your family was being attacked. In this case, if your country was being attacked and you're the president. Now imagine your country watching you back home and they're seeing their president being talked down upon. How is my country going to take me seriously? Clearly, my country's thinking, I can't even stop a war on my own. I need somebody else to help me. And it's very vivid that they're helping me and I'm completely helpless. They're saying bad statements about me, making me look like a wimp, and there's nothing I can say to defend my country. I think it made sense for Zelensky to say that it was not from an ungrateful place. It was from a place of defending their dignity. To add to how much disrespect America in the press conference setting, America showed to President Zelensky. There was a comment from an American journalist, a question rather, from an American journalist. The question talked about why Zelensky does not respect meeting President Trump by wearing a suit as opposed to the clothes that he chose to wear. So President Zelensky was wearing, it had a label on it. I don't know if it was the label of their country or some sort, but it was a black attire, all black pants, and not a sweater per se, but some close to formal top, but not a shirt. So the journalist is asking Guti, why are you not respecting you meeting President Trump? You're not wearing a suit and whatnot. Do you even own a suit? So even the journalist, I don't want to say a mere journalist. I'm also a journalist. And by the way, even a mere journalist can directly ask a question to a president of a whole country and say, why are you disrespecting our country that you can't even wear a suit when you come here? Like, do you even own a suit? It wasn't nice. It wasn't nice. It was an awkward press conference that ended on a questionable note. Another big question is, will Trump change his mind on the peace deal because he thinks Zelensky is ungrateful and disrespectful? I don't know. And if he does, that will also just backlash on Trump as an emotional president. That just because of how the press conference went, you're going to change your mind about a peace deal. You're going to make an emotional decision to then not sign the peace deal anymore? What about the lives that you earlier spoke about? That it's about saving lives, because as we speak, people are dying from gunshots, from bombings, and so forth. It's just making me question now that is Trump going to change his mind about this peace deal because he's respected and he should be respected, and he seems to think that Zelensky is disrespectful and ungrateful? I don't know. But in any situation, even if this was not a presidential issue, even if this was not a continental issue at that, if it was just two men in a heated discussion and people were watching and the one was belittling the other, will the other man not stand up for himself just as a matter of ego? Like, let's just bring it to an individual level before we escalate it to who these two men represent. Obviously, Begazos, he was going to back himself up and whatnot. But you know what? Yeah, let's just leave it at the question that will Trump change his mind on the peace deal because he thinks Zelensky is ungrateful and disrespectful?